Hello and welcome to English 1302 online. This week we are week 6. We are in module 2. We are continuing with Kurt Vonnegut. So let's get started. All right, let's take a look at the assignments that are due first, and then we will go into the parameters for the research report for Kurt Vonnegut and also APA formatting. So under our assignments, we should have already gone over The Life and Times of Kurt Vonnegut, Harrison Bergeron, and To Be or Not to Be, which are the two short stories we're going to be reading or should have read and done those discussion questions. And everything that we're basing our Vonnegut papers on is based on those two stories. Then there was also Vonnegut and the Dystopia. And this week we are moving on to the next ones, which is Life Imitates Vonnegut, which I think is a very cool assignment, honestly. It's where you're going to take on the role of an author and decide how you would have liked to have seen either To Be or Not to Be or Harrison Bergeron end. Most people are not completely satisfied with their endings. I say most. Many people are not completely satisfied with their endings, and this is your opportunity to tell how you would have done differently. So you can start anywhere in the story and choose where you want to start and how you want it to look. Um, And obviously, we've got some people who've already started, and that's cool. But you are basically writing the ending, how you want to see it, and then you're going to respond to two classmates' posts. But be sure to tell me why you chose the ending that you did. Because I'm really actually interested in it. I think my students always come up with some very unique ways to end these stories, and I think that Vonnegut would appreciate quite a few of them. The next one is the Vonnegut compare and contrast. And here you are going to be answering these three questions and then answering replies to your classmates' posts. And for both of these, I believe the initial post is due by Wednesday, the 8th. And then because of the number of assignments that we have this week, due to introducing Vonnegut, um, the secondary replies are due by the 10th, which is actually Friday on these. So be sure to not overthink it, but give some thoughtful answers. And please don't use AI on these. I have too many people using AI on their discussion board posts. So please don't do that. Um, and again, the Vonnegut one, that is completely creative. It doesn't have, it can be as detailed as you want, or you can just detail to me this why you'd like to see it changed or how you'd like to see it changed. You can either write the story out like you were the author, which is what I prefer. But if you don't feel like you are um, a great writer in that way, then just tell me how you would have rather seen it end. That would be just fine. Um, the other big thing we have this week is the peer review, which means you need to have your rough draft by the end of the week. We're going to talk about what the writing assignment, the research report assignment is for this week, the prompts that your choices are. I do want to make a note of the peer review. If you do not turn in a rough draft and you do not review someone else's work, another classmate's draft, then you will lose 20 points off your final Vonnegut paper. I had several people who did not review someone else's draft or turn in a rough draft for the last paper, and they will be receiving a 20-point penalty for that. So please, it's important. Many people do take the time to put in what they can, and they really are looking for someone else's thoughts on their papers. Remember, this is an online class, and sometimes it's hard. People who are in the online class may not have access to other people or the ability to get to a campus where they can be reviewed. I believe the Writing Center will do it online, but don't quote me on that. Would have to take a look. I'm sure you can contact them and they'd be happy to help you out with that. But peer review is so important. So it gives someone else a chance to catch the mistakes that you've made before it gets to me. So please be sure that you participate and you understand what you have to do. So you have to upload your rough draft by Friday, the 10th, and then you need to review someone else's rough draft by the end of the day on the 11th, which is the next day. Um, and that is all of the assignments that are actually due this week. Vonnegut, Life imitates Vonnegut, the compare and contrast, and the peer review. Now, let's take a look at the instructions for the actual Vonnegut paper. They're actually incredibly similar to the Shirley Jackson paper. It's basically the same type of paper that we're writing. The prompts, of course, have changed. They're a little different. And it has to do with dystopia, since we know that Vonnegut has to do with dystopia, whereas Jackson had to do with psychological horror. We have changed the prompts in that way. So the very first prompt is this one. Remember, the prompt is in bold. And I'm afraid there's not many other ways I could actually differentiate that. But the prompt is, does Vonnegut accurately warn readers about what can happen when societies pursue utopian ideals too aggressively? Remember, the idea behind a dystopia is that it's a utopia gone bad, and a utopia is defined as the perfect place or a perfect place. Um, and really, utopia means no place because there is no perfect place. But the idea behind it remains. And a dystopia is the imperfect place. And as we well know, dystopias do exist. Um, so that's the question that you are answering. And you're being asked to examine at least two real world or fictional societies, excluding the modern United States. Please don't use the modern United States. That's too big of an argument for the scope of this paper. And it's just not, it's a negativity that I don't need in this course at this time. So please do not use the modern United States for any, or you just don't use the United States for this paper. Um, there are plenty of other real world societies that have bigger problems. So please use one of those or fictional society based in the stories that we have. Lots and lots of fictional dystopias. But you're going to examine at least two. I would prefer like one real world and a fictional. I think that's a good mix. So see what you find. And you're basically examining those two societies that attempted to create a more equal, orderly, or perfect society. I could think of one right now. Um, North Korea is a great example of a dystopian society where the people are not free. They're not really taken care of. It, but I will leave it to you to do your research on that. There have been other ones in the past that were designed to be a utopia, but didn't work out that way. I leave it to you. That's your research. Find one or two that just didn't work out. Real world dystopias, so to speak. You're going to analyze how those societies justified their goals and what consequences resulted from their attempts to improve their society, and explain whether your examples support, complicate, or contradict Vonnegut's portrayal of dystopian societies in Harrison Bergeron and, or your choice, to be or not to be. You can pick one or you can use both, but you are comparing real world dystopias or dystopic societies or even fictional dystopic societies to Vonnegut. Remember, we're always tying it back to the Vonnegut stories. And this gives some more information about how to analyze that. So I'll let you read through that. The second prompt is about equality, equity, and the cost of fairness. And the second prompt is this. According to Vonnegut's stories, what are the dangers of pursuing equality or equity without limits? And are those dangers reflected in real world or fictional societies? That's the question that you are answering. So you will probably want to examine at least one real world society or system and one fictional one, historical or experimental one, again, excluding the modern United States, that attempted to create equality, fairness, or social balance. And the bigger reason why I'm having you exclude the modern United States is that there's not enough academic data just yet on how well the modern United States is doing. I say this purely from a scientific point of view. There's plenty of popular media opinions about how we're doing. Popular media is rife with that, but unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of academic, scholarly information. We do have some, but not. I don't think we really have enough because I think we need a little bit more empirical data. So that's one of the reasons why I'm asking you to exclude the modern United States. But there's plenty of other societies that you can choose from. You're going to analyze what citizens or participants gained and what they gave up. So there's always a cost there. And you're going to explain whether these examples reinforce or challenge Vonnegut's criticism of enforced equality in Harrison Bergeron or To Be or Not to Be. So they're very similar prompts, but slightly different bents. So be sure to choose carefully which one you think that you would like to answer. So I will see if I can't highlight these somehow to make sure that you know which exactly the prompt is. Again, it's a minimum of 1,000 words. You need to use as your sources at least one of the Vonnegut stories. You can use both. They both are very apt for this. Um, you have to have at least 2 scholarly academic sources from the college library database. Remember, if you don't have academic scholarly sources, if all you have is the story, then you are writing an opinion piece and not a research paper. And unfortunately, that will not count for this paper. So remember, you need to have 2 academic scholarly sources. One of the things that I saw in the papers from the Jackson papers where I saw people not using proper formatting, which was MLA at the time. This paper is going to be APA formatting, which we'll go over here in just a minute. I had people who wrote opinion pieces rather than write a research report. You must bring in outside research that supports your thesis. That is what a research paper is. If you have any questions about that, please review some of the material that I have in writing resources or in the chapters if you still have the book. And if you don't, I can provide you with some information if you would like a little bit more. Um, but make sure that you are writing a paper correctly. And again, no AI. I had several people who used AI. Do not use AI to fix your paper. Do not use AI to find mistakes in your paper because it will flag it for AI, and then we're going to be in a situation where you have to prove that you wrote it, and that's harder than you think. So please don't use AI. If you have any questions about the actual assignment, please let me know. So again, 1,000 words. One of the prompts, you have to use one of the Vonnegut stories at least, 2 scholarly sources, and after you have your scholarly sources, then you can use any other credible sources that you deem necessary. In other words, popular media sources. But popular media sources cannot be your sole sources. This paper will be in APA style, which is slightly different than MLA. APA stands for American Psychological Association, whereas MLA stands for Modern Language Association. Um, you are required to have in-text citations and a references page. If you have a references page, you will have in-text citations. And if you are using sources, you will have in-text citation. So these two things are not mutually exclusive. If you have in-text citations, you must have a references page. Just like if you have in-text citations in MLA, you must have a works cited. And since you are being asked to provide 2 sources, you must have them. So without those on your paper, there's an automatic deduction. If you're missing APA formatting, which includes double spacing, if you don't have in-text citations for the information that you're using, and if you don't have a reference page. So it's references for APA and works cited for MLA. Then there's the evaluation criteria and some tips for writing a better paper. So there you go. Those are all the instructions for the Vonnegut paper. But let's take a quick look. That Vonnegut paper will be due on the 18th. So not this week, but the next Saturday. So let's take a look at the differences between APA and MLA. So we're going to go over here to writing resources, and notice just like I have the MLA folder here, I have the APA folder here. And hopefully some of you took advantage of the fact that I had the MLA template for you to use. I have the same here in the APA. It's under here under sample paper and template. Now there's two different ones here. First one is a sample paper that will show you the different parts of APA and why we do them. So it gives you the comments here about what's being done and why it makes it different. So this is actually kind of useful. It's worth taking a quick look at. There's some different things in APA from MLA that don't seem that big a deal, but they kind of are. And then here is the template. It's a Word doc that you can download and use for your paper. All you have to do is put your information here. So your title, your name. Um, you would change this, of course, to Lee College. And you can change the date, and you would change the prefix number here. Don't leave it XXX. Doesn't It's just Department of English, Lee College, not San Jacinto. Then your abstract would go here, the keywords here, that's something we'll talk about, the title of your paper's just here. It's totally formatted for you to simply type your paper in, but you do have to change these certain things. And then here's where the references pages start. And just like MLA, the references have the hanging indent, meaning the first line hangs over any secondary lines. So that's the template there that you can use. I just wanted to point that out. But let's go into some of the APA things. So what we have here is a quick checklist of the differences of the APA styling. So you have Times New Roman again, so that's the same as MLA. You have everything, including a header, a page number, a heading. I don't know why this says works cited. Now that I'm looking at this, I'm not sure this is such a great use of this. Hold on. We'll see if we can find a different one. Okay, I found the difference, and I will change that before you get to see it. But here is the one I was actually looking for. So it's MLA versus APA, the major differences that matter. It's on our main page for this module, and I will put it in writing resources. So my apologies. Okay, so in MLA style, you have the last name and page number in the top right corner. With APA style, it's only the page number. So you don't have to put your last name there. With MLA, a title page is not required. Remember, we put all of the information in the upper left corner on MLA, but with APA, a title page is required, and you will type the title of the paper and put it in bold. In fact, all of the titles in APA are in bold, whereas they are not in MLA. You get points off in MLA if you do that, but you must do it in APA. Then you're going to skip a couple lines and put your name, the name of the school, the name of your class, which is English 1302, my name, and then whatever the date is. Next, the differences in in-text citations. So in MLA, when you use a direct quote, such as this, you'll put the author's last name and then the page number where it came from in parentheses after the quote. In APA, you do the same thing, but APA is very specific about using dates and punctuation. Notice there's no punctuation in MLA, but there is punctuation in APA. So it would be the author's last name, comma, the year of publication, comma, then you're going to use page with the little P and the page number if you have it. If you don't have the page number, then you would need the paragraph number, or if that's unavailable, you would just put the author's last name and the year of publication. That's if it's a direct quote. Paraphrase citation, In MLA, you're just, if you name the author at the beginning of the paraphrase, like Jackson argues the blind acceptance of tradition can be dangerous, you're just going to put the page number at the end because you've already said the author's name. And it's a paraphrase. You're not actually saying exactly what they said. You're not giving a direct quote. You've put it in your own words. So if you do that in a APA paper, you put the date of publication behind the last name. And you don't have to put the page number. It's not necessary. So the same paraphrase would look like this. Jackson, 1948, argues that blind acceptance of tradition can be dangerous. So, but you still need to put that date. Again, they're very, very interested in the date of publication. Your sources page in MLA is called Works Cited. Your sources page in APA is called References, and it is bolded. It is not bolded in MLA, it is bolded in APA. Again, I know these seem like really nitpicky differences, but they are differences nonetheless. And then finally, the date format, which honestly, I'm not as much of a stickler for this as other people are. In MLA, they want you to put it in the European date format with the date, then the month, then the year. In APA, they want you to put it in month, date, year, which is much more what we are used to. So I actually prefer the American version, um, but that's just me. So there is a template provided for both MLA and APA. They both use Times New Roman 12-point font, so you don't need to change that. They are both double spaced, including your references page, the source page. My recommendation is to submit it as a docx file rather than a PDF. If you are especially concerned about AI, then I would submit it as a docx file. In fact, I would actually recommend that you do your paper in Google Docs and then save it as a docx and upload it that way. Uh, there are reasons for that because if you do it in Google Docs, then there's easier ways to prove that you did not use AI for writing your paper. You're going to make sure that you have a references for APA, and you're going to make sure that the page number is at the top. If you use the template that I provided, you don't have to change that at all. It's already set up for you. And there you go. So this particular chart is found right here in the main Blackboard page. And I will actually put that chart, I will replace that chart with the checklist in the writing resources. So going back to writing resources, there's still a lot more information about APA should you need it. There's the template, like I said. Let me just show you what I meant by a title page. So this is the title page. Remember, in MLA, we don't have this title page. We just have that information right here. But for APA, they want a title page. And since we don't actually use paper anymore, it's not that big a deal. So a title page is just kind of a throwback to back when things were printed and it was easier to identify people's work with that title page on the top. So that's what this is. This is what your title page would look like. See what I'm talking about? Almost, there's no real specific spacing here, like so many lines. It's just almost to the middle of the page. You're going to put the title of your paper. Notice it's bold. You're going to skip a couple lines and then you're going to put the rest of your information. And notice it is all double spaced. Now, what I'm asking you guys to do is something that was not included on that chart, and that is write an abstract for your paper. And an abstract is simply a brief summary of what your essay is. Usually it's 2 or 3 sentences or your thesis statement and your conclusion. Now, you would think, why? Why do I need to write an abstract if you have my paper? Well, the answer is this. When you are doing research, and hopefully you'll see this when you're doing some research, you will often run into what is called the abstract of the paper. So if you think back to the Shirley Jackson assignment where we read a scholarly article versus a popular article, that scholarly article was long and kind of difficult to read. But if you'd had an abstract at the beginning, which I assure you that it probably did have an abstract, but for the purposes of that assignment, I didn't show it to you. The abstract would have been a summary of what was in the paper so that when you're doing research, you can read somebody's abstract and know almost immediately whether or not that paper is going to have information that you could use for your paper. So that's why we write an abstract. Now, APA does not require an abstract in student papers anymore. Officially, it used to be you officially used to have to do that. In a professional paper, you're still required to have an abstract if you are using APA format. And there's plenty of that. However, for student papers, they said a couple years ago that you don't have to write an abstract. I, however, have you put an abstract in the paper as a practice because there will be professors who will still want you to write an abstract, even though technically the formatting doesn't call for it anymore because it's just good practice. And it's good practice for anybody who's going into a field where you will be writing papers. It's a good practice to know how to write an abstract to get you ready to publish those sorts of things. Now, are most of you going into those types of fields? Probably not, but it's still good practice. It's good practice for summarizing and whatnot. So that's what the abstract is. And then there's keywords that you're going to put that tie back to your paper or the topics of your paper. So for example, think about it as if you were going to Google your paper. What kind of keywords would you put into Google to find your paper? If you were writing one about Harrison Bergeron, keywords might include dystopia and Vonnegut and Bergeron. If you're using Hunger Games as an example, you would put Hunger Games, or Cambodia as an example, you would put that. So whatever your keywords would be for your paper, that's what you're going to put here. And then when you go down, there's the title of your paper. Notice it's bolded. You start your paper here, and this is already indented for you. Then your references page. Again, this is just a basic APA reference. It's the author's last name and actually first initial. So I should probably change that on there. But it's author's last name, first initial. They don't use their names in APA, just their initials, the year that it was published, the title of the work, where it came from, and then the URL if you got it from the internet. Notice that the title is in italics. And actually, yeah, I think well, this might not be completely correct, so I will double check that. But they've changed it several times since this template came out. So in any case, I will try to fix that before I publish this. But uh, your references should be right here, basic references for APA. All right. Furthermore, in here, there's lots of different information. So you've got the template, you've got a formatting video that will show you how to format your APA paper, a video just on in-text citations that will help you with that, the references page. I really recommend this video. If you're having any issues with the references page, remember an incomplete references page or a non-existent references page for sure loses 20 points right off the top, and a lot of points can be lost there. Now, if you're going to use any kind of AI help, I would recommend using things like the bibliography generator for this. If you're using scholarly sources, like I showed you last time, it will generate a bibliography reference for you. And all you have to do is tell it that you're using APA 7th edition, and it should generate that for you. If you need more, uh, there is the style guidelines from Purdue University, which you can go to, and I'll talk all about it. So there you go. A lot of help here with APA. It's very slightly different from MLA, but there are some differences. You can always call the Writing Center at the Learning Hub, and they can help you with that as well. And I'm happy to answer your APA questions. Just send them via email. But that is basically what we're doing this week. Rough draft at the end of the week. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's the whole reason it's a rough draft. So please be sure to turn something in. I'll be getting your first papers back to you before the end of this week. And that's all I have for you now. Have a great week, everybody.